Hey everyone, and welcome to the Life Formula Podcast. With me, I have a really amazing guest, Adam Hergenrother. Adam, you have a new book that just released, The 200% Life. What is the 200% Life?
Yeah, that's well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate all the work that you do and all the value that you bring to your listeners. I know how much energy goes into these. So thanks for doing what you're doing, Shaun. The 200% life is really on the essence of this is a framework for how to live a life that answers the question for me in terms of how do I focus on this inner world that I have and this outer world. But I don't really want to go and sit there and meditate on a mountaintop in front of a fire, reciting haikus. It's not even comfortable to sit Indian style, right? So it's really for me, and I'll back up a little bit of kind of the origin of how this kind of the book came about. I up until I was about 15 or 16 years old, I was about 100 pounds overweight, and then I was failing classes, kind of like that role model student you wanted your kids to hang out with. And I ended up coming home one day listening to Celine Dion back then, and I just kind of stayed up all night and trying to visualize kind of what I wanted my life to be like. And I didn't know exactly what. I just knew that I was no longer going to live the life that I was living, and it felt very inauthentic to me, meaning that I was trying to always please others or trying to be somebody else who I wasn't. And so I kind of made that shift, and I'll fast forward through the years. I'll put a pin in that moment. Um, I started having success in business, and I had this idea, like a lot of us do, that and for me, it was specifically around a number that once I hit $500,000 in net income, that somehow there was going to be a fruit tree out back that was going to give me total well-being at all times, right? Like I had bought into the concept that power, money, fame, success, all of that was somehow going to be able to create an environment that I felt inside great all the time. And I remember the moment specifically when I was about 26, 27, which was about 10 years after that moment I had when I was in high school, that I was at my mom's house for a holiday party. And I was like, Mom, I kind of made this $500,000 this year. And she was like, oh, that's great. Like, pass the ketchup. Like she just didn't care. And in fact, nobody really cared. And then I started asking the questions like, do I even really care? Like, what is the whole point of doing all of this anyways? And at that point, I wouldn't say depressed, but when you have an idea of once you get to a specific goal and the goal is then going to hopefully transition you into a new state of consciousness or being, you don't say it that way, but you feel like you're just going to feel better inside after you hit this goal, right? And temporarily you do for most of it, right? Most people have had goals in their lives and once they get it, then they want something else. But for a moment they feel relieved or they feel better inside from getting something outside. And I was no different. I found it and I just went after it relentlessly. And then when that happened, I just started asking different questions. I wasn't fully out of the realm of what of trying to want money and power at that point in my life, but I had oriented myself differently, Shaun. And I can remember right after that happened, I ended up getting connected with a transcendental meditation teacher. This was back in 08. So you got to imagine like this is not quite it is today for meditation purposes. It's much more commonly talked about now. But I went and saw him, and he'd been teaching. He was with Ramani Maharshi, and I learned it. And I always joke with people, it's kind of like the gateway drug into spirituality for me. It just kind of stopped and gave me this sense of, all right, there is this voice inside, there is these emotions, and you have your spiritual heart. Okay, that's kind of this inside world. But I didn't want to go live in the Himalayas, right? It wasn't really part of my nature or what I really wanted to do. So for about 3 years, I kind of was like oscillating between like wanting to be the spiritual guy and then wanting to like go conquer the world, right? And I remember for like literally kind of in between this stage, and I just said, there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a way that you can bring both of these together. And so about 10, 12 years ago, I started teaching randomly one time. I had about 300 people in a course. And I stopped in the middle of the class, and I can remember this. And I was like, does anybody else have that voice inside your head? Right? Like, does anybody have that in there? Is it talking? And everyone's like, yes. And so I started talking about the experience. And then to come to my imagination, people were really genuinely interested about their inner experiences. That's just kind of paraphrasing that now. And so we actually ended up teaching, it was supposed to be a business course, talking about this spirituality for a while. And so from there on out, I just started teaching and talking more in our organizations. And, we went from, starting off borrowing $8,000 in business to now I have over 1,000 people that work for me, and built many different companies, sold a couple companies. And that's been a wonderful ride on the outside. But the 200% life is, as you can just kind of frame that for people, is a way of like, how do I go and live in the outside world, right? Which is vacations, cars, or not cars, or bicycles, or having kids, not having kids, building a business, being a school teacher, being an artist. It doesn't matter, like playing in the outside world. And yet at the same time, understanding that I'm really looking for this inner experience that is higher than anything that's outwardly, right? Like I know that I don't want to play this game where I'm trying to get something outside to make me feel better inside, which to me is just a worldly individual, somebody who uses the world, right, is manipulating the world to try to get people, places, things, experiences, events to not hit their inside too much. And that's what, to me, that's what people really think about when they think about success, Shaun, is they think about success in terms of, okay, as long as I can get enough money and fame and statue that I can be able to control the scenes around me so that my thorns inside or my inner experience doesn't get too messed up. But we all know that just doesn't work. It's not wrong. It just doesn't work. The minute you get what you want, then you fall into the trap of needing to protect it, or somebody's taking it away from me, or do I trust this person anymore? And so it doesn't matter how much money you have. Mechanically, I understand how money works, and it's great. If money's with you, that's wonderful. And you can do a lot of fun things, or you can do a lot of things for yourself with money. It's irrelevant, actually. It's the part of you that's actually doing that. So the 200% life really came about as a way of teaching in our organization, and then constantly people asking about it. So I believe when you have something to say, you can kind of put it in writing. And over the last couple of years, I wrote the book, The 200% Life, as a model, as a framework for how to link the two together between personal spiritual growth and worldly kind of business growth, just because I'm in the business sector, but it really goes for anything in the outward world, and how to make sense of those two and how do you bring them together in your life so you can live both. Because really life is not just an inner world and it's not just an outer world. One starts first, but it's not one or the other. And most people in their lives wake up spending 99% of their life in the outer world, not even recognizing or paying attention to the fact that there's this whole inner world that has a whole wonderful experience of what you're really looking for in the first place. So long-winded answer to your question, but I just wanted to backstory this a little bit as to kind of how it came about. And really it was self-therapy for me. And here we are.
Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sharing that story. There's a lot to unpack there. So, the first part that I think would be interesting to ask you is, how has your identities changed from when you were in high school to 2008 to where you are currently?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think of identities as kind of roles that we play. It's almost as if like each season you have a different jacket or a shirt that you put on. And I see it the same way. For me, I was never a father before. I'm a father. So that's not who I am, but it's a role that I play, right? It's an identity that you have. And identities and roles are great for characterizing and mechanically working through life. The key is to just never be trapped to any of them. I don't feel like I am a business leader. Well, if somebody could say I'm a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar organization, that's a role I play, but I don't attach to that. There are certain times where I'm a teacher, right? Whether it's teaching business or teaching personal or spiritual growth, and I don't attach to that. Those are just things that we do. There's times that I'm a janitor, right? That I'm picking up trash that are out there too as well. And so for me, I think about identities or roles as just things that we're doing when we're interacting with the outside world. And if we want to label those things with specific words, they're great. And they're ways to be able to introduce ourselves for sure. But if anything, the identities have fallen away since my high school, meaning that there's no line. I can understand, like right now I'm doing a podcast with you, Shaun, right? Like you understand that, but I'm not attached to any of the roles, and they're just things that we're doing with life. It's almost as if like once you're willing to give life back to life, you don't see them as roles, you just see them as contribution.
So, when you live your day to day life, would you say that you are more detached from the outcome, the end life, the goal, or are you attached to certain things, or is there like a balance between the two? How do you manage your attachment and detachment to goals that you're chasing, to relationships that you have, and things like that?
It's a wonderful question. Thank you for that deep question, Shaun. Um, I'd like to tell you that I'm 100% detached from everything. There are certain things that I still get attached to. And I think for me, it's about how quickly can I recognize that I'm still attached to things. Goals have a beginning and an end. They're not the purpose of your life, and they're not you. You can be laser focused on goals. You can, in a business, you need to have accountability. You need to have metrics. You need to have goals. Like if we go out and I love coaching all of my kids' sports, right? And we have a goal to win, right? That's a goal, but it's not who we are. Those are fun things to do. So at times it's important to recognize the importance of a goal to keep us entertained, to keep us focused, to keep us playing. The key to all of that is to continue to remind ourselves that those are the things that we're doing, and they're fun, and we can have goals to keep us entertained, and we can celebrate those goals that we hit and those milestones, but none of them are you. There are at times where, and specifically around money, I can really get Velcroed back into a thought or attached to it. And it's just how quickly can I get back out of that to recognize that I've fallen back in there. The whole reason, so what somebody asked, well, why would you do that? And for me, I always work backwards. As a leader, your work product is decisions. I think that the businesses and organizations, lives, parenting, all of those things, your work product is your decisions. So then I always work backwards and go, well, wouldn't you want to set yourself up in a situation so that you are making the highest quality decision in whatever realm or role or identity that you're playing to make a better decision? And so, of course, everyone would say, yes, I would want more clarity. I'd like to see things as undisguised so I can help make a better decision in that moment that I'm asked to make a decision. That's kind of what leadership is getting other people to take a better or higher level of action that benefits them in the organization and business. It's not a abstract concept. It's about getting people into movement that benefits them in the organization or benefits you and your family or whoever the decision that's there. So for me, it starts with how do you get more clarity in your life? And the less detached you are to any of the outcomes for your personal gain of it, the better decision you will make. And then you'll end up actually, in my experience, you'll end up actually getting what you want. You just don't need it anymore. So therefore you're able to enjoy it when it comes in, enjoy it when it goes out. And it's just kind of this, you're like a sojourner in the midst of the quality of life. And you can kind of float in and out between the two.
So I was backtracking from that a little bit. It's like leadership is more of like a win-win, a win for them personally, and a win for the company. This is something I connected from what you got from that.
Yeah.
And something that I've been pondering for a while now is that in order to become successful on the outside, not on the inside, on the outside, externally, do people like leaders, CEOs, authors, celebrities, or whoever, do they become spiritual first? Then they become successful because of their spiritual knowledge and experience? Or do they go down the path of living completely on the outside, living by material possessions, being attached to the specific things, then they become spiritual or more spiritual on the outcome of that?
Yeah. It's a great question. I answer that in two different ways. The way that I experienced my life is I had to go through the level of suffering by going out there and getting what I want and doing it, and then realizing that, and I didn't say suffering, like it's not like I broke my arm or bankrupt. I mean like suffering inside, right? Being like I've gotten what I want and I still feel shitty. I still have the same tape playing in the background when I was successful or in a $10 million home or a 400 square foot apartment. I still feel the same inside. So therefore the exterior isn't going to bring me what I'm actually truly looking for. That's what I mean of that level of suffering. And I just realized, this doesn't work. Right. And I think a lot of people need to go through that, right? In terms of like, they need to go through some level of suffering that brings an awakening, not an enlightenment. That's a totally different state of consciousness, but that brings an awakening to just an individual that says, look, I've kind of played this game, right? And I've shown like, I've been doing this all my life. Like I started, I wanted a bunny, and then I wanted a bike, and then I wanted my driver's license. Then I wanted to be 21. And then I wanted a car. Then I wanted a house, right? I wanted to graduate college, and all these things happen. And every time you've kind of said that, you're like, if I can just get that, it's going to be great. And then once you get that, it's just what's next. If it's not this, it's next. That's kind of the line that I always use. If it's not this, it's next, right? And you just play this game, and you kind of wake up and you go, all right, there's nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't work, right? In the way that you're trying to make yourself feel better. And so I think a lot of people that we see in our society took the steps of falling into the same trap that I did, which is if I go get everything I want, then I can control the outside because I can hire people. I can have all the leverage. I can have people, massage therapists at my, on salary. I can have people cleaning my house and cars. I have all this stuff. And then once you get it, you go like, holy shit, I still feel hollow inside, right? I feel a level of suffering. And then you kind of do the deep inner work at that point. And I think the majority of it, you've heard a lot of, Will Smith is great at talking about that. There's Jim Carrey is great at talking about, there's uh, Oprah, all these different people, they kind of went into that era. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Singer at all, but Michael Singer is, I think, the opposite. He's a dear friend of mine. I spent a lot of time with Michael. And the interesting about Michael is that he was the opposite, right? He came in being very spiritual to go live in the woods and not have anybody bother him, and eventually running and built a multi-billion-dollar company. And it's funny because you ask him to go talk in a business setting, he goes, I can't talk to anybody in business because I have no idea how to build a business. Actually, one time he told me, he's like, when we were going public, we had to go and put together a board of directors. And I had to go Google what a board of directors was, right? And so it's like, he took himself and he went into, and if your listeners aren't familiar with Michael, he's got a couple books out there. The Surrender Experiment talks about what we're talking about here, or the Untethered Soul, or Living Untethered. And, but he is an individual that I know personally that, answers that question, which he came in spiritually, who found himself in business, wildly successful, and then, found himself out of the business world because it was not there, and does not want to ever go back into that space. And now, has been teaching a couple times a day for, 40 plus years. By the way, it's funny because guy's got so much money, it's not even funny. And you go into his house and he's got like a camper stove, right? And it hasn't changed his house. And it's not because he doesn't need to build anything. He's just like, it's fine. He's just got this nature of who he is. So those are kind of some examples of the two. But for me, it was, and I think a lot of people in the United States specifically, or the Western society, need to go through a level of suffering of getting what they want to realize that getting what you want is overrated.
Yeah, I get kind of confused sometimes because through social media and the whole comparison game there is that you got people who's hardcore, people like perhaps people like Joe Rogan and David Goggins and campaigns, people who are very masculine, that say hard work gets you to where you want to go. Then on the spiritual leaders, the spiritual creators, they're like, oh no, just allow everything to flow to you and attract and be present and don't worry about it. It's like, but both of them end up reaching their same goal. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly it is where like they intersect, because either way seems to lead to the right path of whatever your goal or your dream is. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, that's a great one. And I think a lot of people get confused there. And that's the 200% Life kind of talks a lot about this. There's, remember, let me just use Michael as an example. Michael worked basically 7 days a week. So he worked harder than anybody else did. It's never not about not hard work. It just didn't flow to him like, I'm going to sit back in a chair and everything's just going to naturally flow. What he'll tell you is that he was working extremely hard and things unfolded while he was working, and he interacted with the moment that's in front of him, which then brought him that level of success, or the business grew from that way. So David's not wrong, or Joe's not wrong in terms of like hard work, never giving up. It's true. It's the same thing even in spirituality. If you want to really do the deep work in spirituality, personal growth, it's the hardest work you'll ever do in your entire life. And it takes absolute resolve to be able to do it. The key, Shaun, that I always find, and it's such a silver, small slither of difference, which is spirituality is never about not doing something in the outer world. It's about what part of you is actually doing it. And that's what you should always go back on. It's like there is a self-concept / ego that people have created, which is all their experiences they've had, people that have talked to them, things they've read, all that stuff. They've created it. It's like a real mirage. It's a self-concept of who you think you are. There's a strong desire. The strongest desire in humans is to stay consistent with that self-image that you created, self-concept. And so when you create a self-concept like that, if the self-concept is telling you, or the ego is telling you to go, which is, if you pay attention to this is what the ego is, like a 2-year-old toddler that's having a fit, that's spoiled. It's telling you, oh, go get another job, make more money. If you go get out of this relationship and you get somebody else, man, this is going to be over. If you just get that person to do what you're looking to do, like, this is going to be great. If I can just make this amount of money in this next month, if I can just get this person on my podcast, they're going to be great. If I can just get this person to endorse my book, like, this is going to be great. And then you just go out and do all those different things. So you're running your life based on this lower self. Spirituality says, that's fine, that's there. What I'm going to do is not pay attention to that, and I'm going to interact with life in the way that we interact with every other part of the universe. The universe has been here for 27 billion years. The earth has been here for 4.5 billion years. Your body has 25 trillion cells in it. Your pancreas secretes, your liver works, your heart pumps, you can see, you can hear, your hair grows. Nobody's doing any of that, right? So we're already leaning in and letting life do its dance on 99.9% of everything else. And then we come down to this 0.00001% of life, which is, what do I want to do with my life? Where's my passion? And that's when we think we can, that's where the whole definition of egoic comes from. Being egocentric is like, it's not about huffing and puffing about, look at me. That's just a form of it. Ego is like, life should be the way I want it to be. I don't care if you ever talk to another person or not. It's like, well, life should be this way. The weather should be this way. People should be doing this thing. That is the true definition of ego. So what happens is when you can let go of that part of you, you then start to interact directly with life and it looks the same. It's just that lower self is not directing you, which is why people are walking around feeling very inauthentic, because it is inauthentic. It's like if you were to take a Cabbage Patch doll and put a computer in it and put it next to you and it talks to you all the time and you pay attention to it, people would think that's wild. But that's what you're doing right now anyways. Your mind doesn't know hardly anything that's going on, right? The mind only knows what you've experienced. And I think we all agree, if there's been a quadrillion experiences since we've been on this podcast, we've only experienced one that's 0.0 and carry it out as far as you can, statistically insignificant. I always give the analogy. It's like taking a book that's 100 million pages and taking 2 words and reading them and going, I know everything about the book, right? Like nobody would buy into that. But that's how we buy into our minds of thinking that the mind knows everything and we should listen to it. And this is where people get pulled out of the seat of self, if you want to use that big word. It just means that you get pulled out of your natural state of allowing life to be life, which is going to be anyways, instead of trying to superimpose your reality onto it and getting all confused and inauthentic. So the goal to answer the question really is just the more you can let go of that, the thoughts of directing how and what you should be doing with your life, the more naturally there will be a flow of life, which ends up being the highest form that you can serve. And I'll give you one more example and I'll pause. It's like if you've ever been skiing or basketball or hockey or any sports that you've been in, you can get into this little, what people have dubbed like the flow state, right? And really in that state, you're not really thinking, but you're interacting with life, aren't you? You still are conscious that your mind is there, but you're not thinking, I'm going to go left up here. You're just in that movement of moving together with life. That's how you can live and interact with life when you get outside of your mind.
What are some practices or techniques that you suggest to help people practice observing your thoughts? Is it things just like meditation? I know that you mentioned transcendental meditation earlier. Is it breath work? Is it journaling? Is it a mixture of all of those? Or is there like a secret hidden thing that you've came across these past couple of years? Or what do you recommend to allow people to practice being aware and realizing that you're not the ego, you're the awareness of, you're not your thoughts, you're not your body, you're not your mind, you're the spirit, you're the sentience, you're the soul behind it that's observing it. How, because most people aren't even aware of that. And that's why I think a lot of people struggle with meditation, because they don't realize that it's all about just having zero thoughts, but it's like it's just observing the thoughts. It's just understanding that you're the awareness of, thinking about uh, the heartbreak that you had, or thinking about this job promotion. And that's not who you are. It's more about being the awareness of. So, what are some of those practices or techniques that you suggest people start to practice or become aware of to help them along that journey?
Yeah, it's wonderful. And you're right. I mean, all of life is suffering because of the mind, right? And you've asked the mind to protect you, and the mind just goes out there and starts thinking about every possibility of things that could go wrong in the future and have gone wrong in the past, and then trying to find solutions for it when none of it even actually occurs. And then that's why people suffer. For me, there are so many different wonderful teachers that teach so many different wonderful techniques that whatever works for you, you should do it. I'll share mine, but again, there are thousands of different ways that you can work on yourself spiritually or personal growth, and whatever works, you should continue to do it. For me, it was transcendental meditation as the beginning of that. And I've now meditated, well over 200 plus thousand hours. But that's still irrelevant, because you can get into a wonderful state of meditation by how are you acting with your kids, right? How are you acting in business, which is really the goal of being able to take that and bring it into your action, not just when you're in a meditative state. But that gives you the awareness of like, wow. And and you're spot on. When people first try to meditate, they go, I can't meditate. I have all these thoughts. And I go, well, great. Who heard the thoughts? They go, what do you mean? I go, well, who's in there listening to the thought? And eventually they go, well, I was. And I go, great, give me a hug, because now you've just learned your first meditation, right? Like, you've now learned that you are not a thought. You couldn't now, you never realized or stopped, just like you said, Shaun, for a moment to realize, wow, there is a thought. There is a voice in here that just talks nonstop. So meditation is a big one. I do journal every day. I think that really helps me just gain clarity, just to dump it out there. I use Evernote. I don't really go back and read my journals. I do have a journal of each one of my kids so I can have a collection of their life. But my journal is just getting things out as a way just to provide and make it more clear for me. I also feel like exercise is a huge, huge component for my life. I feel like I have a blue collar body that needs to be worked. And I love to, work. I've done 21 Ironmans. I've done a lot of long endurance things, and I still exercise between 1 and 6, 7 hours a day, depending on the long days. So exercise is a big one for me that helps that. I do meditate again in the middle of the day. So that's kind of like, what can you do? I think what you can be aware of is like, where do people start? Which is just, if you just take anything away from this podcast and you just do anything, which is just pay attention to that voice telling you what to do all of your life. Just, that's all you want to do, is watch that voice get upset all the time. Just start paying attention to the fact that every time that something doesn't happen the way you want it to outside, the voice starts erupting. Just pay attention to how much it's telling you to do. And from there, if you're sincerely interested in doing this work, that'll be the path. It'll naturally take you, just like a snake sheds its skin naturally. If you just start being aware and you start becoming curious of this, the path is already there. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't think you know what it's going to look like, but the path will be illuminated for you to continue to go on, and it'll show, life itself will show you essentially what you need to be working on each day. If you just stop and just become aware that, hold on, I do have these thoughts inside my head, and man, some of them are really good, some of them are terrible, and most of them are just really bad advice. Why have I been listening to this? And by the way, every time I have the voice go a little corrupt, all of a sudden this, like, the big sister comes in, and like all of a sudden I have all these emotions, right? Like, and what are these things about? And so that's really where people should start. And how do you, once you have the experience, I always call it relax, the RRA, which is relax, release, and act. Right. So it's the first thing you want to do. Specifically, people always then follow up the question and go, okay, if I'm becoming aware of this, do I not just do anything about it? Do I just let a tiger eat me? And I'm like, it's like, surrender or relaxation or releasing is not about passivity. It's not about inaction. In fact, it's a total opposite. What you do is, the minute if you are a doctor and you can't handle a sight of blood, you're no good being a doctor. If you are a leader or a parent or anybody and you can't handle the situation in front of you, you are no good to the situation. It's the same thing. So the first thing you do is you let go of the part of you that you can't handle, because you are in there witnessing that. And then it becomes clear to how you can handle it the best that you can do. But you start with really small things, like the driver in front of you, the weather, the fact that your phone didn't charge last night, or that you couldn't find the shirt that you want, or it's not ironed properly, or you don't look as good as you thought you would do in this shirt. I don't know. Like, it's like, what do people suffer about, right? You start letting these things that have zero benefit and 100% cost, right? I mean, it's like, if you want economics lesson from business, is like, why would you suffer about the weather, which has zero benefit suffering from it? So then what you do is, every time the mind goes, God, it's freaking hot out, or why is it raining today? You just go, look, there's that thought again. That's all right. I'm just going to watch it, and you just let that go. And then you act, and you take your next action.
Yeah, one of those aha moments that I came across, I think it was a couple months ago, where I think I read it in the book, or I seen a social media post about it, was that you literally cannot be your thoughts, because scientists came up with these studies. I don't know how they tracked it, but they said that you have between 60,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day, and they come and go. So if you wore your thoughts, when those thoughts disappear, then you would also cease to exist. So then you literally cannot be your thoughts, because if they disappear, then you would disappear. Yeah. So that was one of those cool things that I came across.
Well, think about it. Sorry, I was just gonna say, think about it. There's a subject object relationship, right? So if you think about it, is if you were when you were 10 years old, Shaun, and you looked in the mirror, right, you saw a different reflection of your physical body. And now when you look in the mirror today, it looks different, but wasn't it the same you looking in the mirror? Wasn't it the same you that was looking in the mirror, just looking at a different reflection? And so then you go like, oh, how old are you? Not from a physical age. There is no age. That's why I said earlier that the scientists are now saying, well, it's 27.8 billion years old. The question now becomes is when do scientists realize that there was never a beginning and never an end? And that's who you are. And the same thing, like if I ask you to think of an apple right now, everyone can think of an apple, right? Some people think of a red apple. Some people think of a green apple. And I say, make the voice say hello 10 times. Hello. Like just make it say it hello inside, right? Who's in there witnessing the apple? Who's in there hearing the voice say hello? Well, that's you. So you can't be the thought. You can't be the image that you can create in there because you can change them. So there has to be a subject object relationship. It's not object object or subject subject. And so therefore you start to begin. I think the highest spiritual first technique is recognizing that you are not your thought. And that itself will take you the rest of the way.
When you are speaking to yourself in that terms, how can you tell the difference between that is the real you and that's the ego?
Yeah, great question.
How can you differentiate the two?
Yeah. You ever had like a aha moment before? You just said that you mentioned that you did. That aha moment, you realize that like you're not that voice or whatever it was. Isn't it like a deep visceral feeling? It's not just a thought that comes in there, but it's an overwhelming sensation of your body. Like it just takes it in there. That is not mind generated, right? That is a visceral contact with it itself, and you feel it, and you say, I know it now. I get it. That's when people have that aha moment, like I get it now. And you go, see, I told you it's purple. It's purple. I knew it was purple, right? And it's like, well, of course it's purple. We've been telling you it's purple. They're like, no, I get it. I get it. No, it's purple. And they're like, yes, you now get it because it's no longer an intellectual thought alone. It's now something that you know and have direct experience with. Just like it's like most people are using the menu in life, right? They're reading about their meal, but they're never really experiencing it. It's an old adage that people have used in spirituality for a long time, but it's such a good one, which is most people are mistaking life for the menu. Instead of actually eating the burger itself, you're reading about it and you're intellectualizing it. And then once you actually indulge in it, then you go, I get it. So part of it is once you start doing the smaller work, you then have direct experience with what it's like to not have to use the mind all the time to tell you what to do and what not to do. And it just becomes that clear. But until that happens and until somebody actually experiences that for themselves over and over again, it doesn't have to be over again. It can just happen one time. You'll never realize, you'll never go back to realizing or buying into that existing thought. You'll recognize that the thought is a thought. Remember, your prefrontal cortex, the left side of your brain, is where thought populates. So typically, like if you're thinking about something, it's always I'm doing it on the right side, maybe in the camera, but it's the left side of your head is where the thought will come in. When you are interacting with life, there's nothing wrong with using the analytical mind of going, what is 2 times 2? 4. That feels different than a thought entering into your consciousness and trying to get you to grab it. You can tell the difference between you using the mind and the mind generating a thought that is trying to get you to pay attention to. And the more and more work you do there, the clearer and clearer that becomes, and undisguised as that is. And as that starts to unfold, you naturally find this spot back there and go, that's just a thought. I don't pay attention to that. And then you just go back to whatever the moment is asking of you to do, you serve. I try not to actually hold on to too many beliefs because a belief is still a thought. And for me, I try not to pay attention to any thought because a thought is just a thought. As an example of this is like somebody comes to me and says, look, like I've done it. Like I've made a bunch of money. I'm successful, but I'm going to sell it all. And I'm going to go live a simple life. Right. That is still a thought. It's the same thought that you're following versus one that says, I'm going to go out and get every single thing, a jet, a car, and everything. And somebody's like, I don't like that life, but this life's good. I'm like, they're both still thoughts, by the way. Like, understand the ego has just shapeshifted you to getting you to think about this new belief structure over here that this is better. But the ego is now still running your life. It's just now running it as a more simple life, albeit maybe one that's more less stressful. Maybe you can get a little bit more creative. Maybe you're not indulging in debt, and that's a better mechanical, relatively way to get your life better. But it's still a thought that you're acting on. So I just am very clear in my life that those are all thoughts. And so I really don't put much emphasis on the thought itself. And when you don't, like, you just find yourself interacting, just like go back to that flow state when you get confused on that. Sometimes whoever's listening to this, at least I do this, is going back to that is like when you're in that flow state, you don't need thought to interact with life, right? It's almost like you're giving yourself back to life for life knowing everything. It already knows way more. Again, it's like, how do you create a baby? I understand how you make a baby, but like, you're not doing anything to create that kid. Go make me an eyeball, or go make it learn how to, like, right? You're helping. I understand you're helping and supporting it, but we're not doing anything. And yet, I mean, we know nothing. I mean, it's, again, people don't like to hear it and people don't talk that way, but it's really true. Like, we really don't, right? It's the Earth's, I mean, 28 billion years is what they're saying. And the Earth has been here 4.5 billion. You're here for 100 years. I mean, it's silly to think that we would actually know anything. So it should actually be freeing, though. So then he says, well, what's the point of being here? Play with life. There's birds that sing to you. There's trees. There's people that look all sorts of different. Some of them are nice to you. Some of them are super mean to you, right? It's all part of the experience that you're having in life, that you're just allowing life to experience itself. And that's what you're a vessel to experience the unfolding of life, which you'll never stop. And soon it'll be gone anyways. You'll be dead before you know it. So just go in there, and before you take your last breaths, you're just going to ask the question, which is, you know, to me anyways, it's almost irrelevant to even think about after death, because we don't know, right? Like, it's sure, you can have hypothesis and you can have all these, but there's still beliefs. It's still taking you out of the moment, though. So I guess the roundabout way of answering that is, I would stress against not buying into thoughts that pull you out of the present moment, because then you're not living. And this is why people are afraid of death. People are afraid of death because they think that they still are expecting some high level experience in their life. Well, the reality is the only reason why there's not an experience that you're looking for, that you feel like you haven't found yet, is because you're still listening to the ego. You're still listening to the mind. The minute you get outside of that, you realize that you've experienced everything fully. And therefore, that's why a true yogi is never afraid to die. They don't look for it, but they're never afraid to die because they've already experienced life fully. And that's what people are truly searching for. The absolute freedom in life, not just relative freedom, absolute freedom is to be able to walk through this world undisturbed, meaning that they can walk through it. Anything can happen and they're fine with anything. It doesn't mean it'll go their way. They're just okay with whatever life is doing. And to me, that is the highest form that you can live.
What are some of those first steps that for people that are either watching this or listening to help them live authentically and aligned and with purpose and stay present along the journey?
Yeah. For if you're listening to this and you've gotten this far, you have a somewhat of a sincere interest in your spirituality, or a sincere interest in this, because it's got pretty deep. So thank you, Shaun. So to me, it tells you that you're here wanting to listen to this, because there's going to be plenty of people that just would never even tune into. They're like, I like my voice and I like living and I like relatively getting okay. You're never going to change that, right? Until they're ready to change. To me, it's the first step is that your intent is there. The intent matters more than anything, which is, look, I'm not going to be perfect at this and I'm going to screw it up, but my intent is to really search for a deeper truth, to search for the meaning of life, to know thyself, to understand what this inner experience is, whatever you want to put in after that. But the intent has to be there of like, all right, you know what? And let me just clarify for people, the intent to me really has to be of, I've played this worldly game before. Again, I'll just repeat myself for a second of trying to use the world to try to manipulate the world, getting things that I want. And I've realized that doesn't work, meaning that it doesn't turn me on. And then every time I get something, look, there's never been a luxury item that you've ever wanted that once you have it is no longer a luxury item, is it? Every luxury item you wanted, once you have it for a period of time, is no longer a luxury item. It just becomes something you have and have to deal with. So again, we all know this. Then people just say, but if I had $10 million, now it'd be different. I'm telling you, it's not. It's not. It doesn't matter how many zeros you can put on there. That voice does not change. And then it just goes, I need $1 billion. And you go, I'm not going to play this game, guys. You can do your own thing, mine. I'm not going to listen to you anymore. So the first is that intent of realizing and waking and just orienting yourself towards this inner world first, instead of the doing world, which is not going to play that game. And then if you do that, the intent is there. It'll be that the path will unfold exactly for you.
And there's a sentence that's been life changing for me is that we are human beings, not human doings.
Yeah.
So you got the whole point of being a human is being, not always doing
Yeah.
things.
That's
So
exactly
I thought
right.
was beautiful.
Yeah. It's a beautiful saying.
I know that we are wrapping up, so I'd like to ask you my last question, which is the whole purpose of this podcast is to bring on amazing and enlightened guests such as yourself to ask you the question on from your own experience, your own belief, your own thought from your own, and all that stuff. Is that if you could craft a perfect life formula, either for yourself or for all of humanity, what would your equation be?
It'd be R plus R equals A, which is relax, release, and take action. If you relax, you're clear. If you're releasing the emotion, you're not caught by it. You're not pulling it. You're not surrendering. You're not clinging to it. You're allowing the energy to be the energy. And then once you're clear, you act in life. That may be getting married. That may be having kids. That may be building a huge business. It's first you relax, then you release the energy, and then you act. If you follow those steps, it'll take you on a very far path.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
your book just released, so I'll have the all the descriptions in the show notes and description for that, for the links to get your book. And where else can people follow you to support you and serve your mission,
Yeah.
help you serve your mission?
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. If you go to adamhergenrother.com, and if you just start even spelling it and get it somewhat right, the last name, it's not that hard. It should pull up. But our podcast there, our books there, we have a bunch of free downloads, stuff about our organizations, all that stuff is there. So check that out.